Ya Allah. Bismillah. Inshallah, we're going to get started now with our class. Bismillah. 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 Ya Allah. Hello. طيب أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا سهلا رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم إلى نور الفهم وأكرمنا بمعرفة العلم وزين أخلاقنا بالحلم يا أرحم الراحمين آمين آمين. Amma ba'd, Jazakumullah khair for coming to the last session in our six-part series about faith foundations. This is meant to be an introduction to the articles of faith for new Muslims. This is actually the sixth session. We missed one session before Eid, so that's why we're making it up with this one. And with it, we'll be done with actually 5 of 6 articles. 5 of 6 articles. There's one more article of faith that we didn't cover, and it could be covered in part 2 of this, I guess this learning track that we have at the masjid that's meant for new Muslims or newly practicing Muslims. And that last article of faith is divine decree, qadar. It's actually the most complex of the articles of faith that we've studied. There's a lot to say about it, and hopefully when we have the part 2, we'll go into details about what qadar and divine decree entails. Briefly, are we compelled to our ends as human beings? Or are we free in our choice? Is there any limitations and boundaries? What's the relationship between what God has ordered and what we can choose? That's what the last article is about. But there's so much to say about the 5th article, which is belief in the Day of Judgment, that I wanted to continue with a part 2. We in our book, we were on page 83 last time, and when we started going over belief in the Day of Judgment, we discussed the journey to the hereafter. The hereafter, or the word in Arabic, as it states in the book, is the akhirah. Akhirah is a term that you, if you're a new Muslim, you should become acquainted with. It's repeated. Akhirah is the afterlife or the hereafter. We also went over the dimension of the life of the grave, and we refer to that in Arabic as barzakh, and that's where the soul remains until the Day of Judgment comes. And the other term that we went over last time was qiyamah. These terms are defined on page 81 in the book, by the way. At the bottom of 81, you'll see these terms. Qiyamah, when people will stand before Allah. Now, you notice in the titling of the section, it's called the final hour, right? Another name for the Day of Judgment is al-yawm al-akhir, the last day. Why is it called the last day, right? There's actually an interesting wisdom behind that. It is the last part of our existence that's connected with this life. That's one of the wisdoms behind it being called the last day. Why? Because after that, there'll be 2 eternal abodes, Jannah or Nar, heaven or hell. And we'll be completely disconnected from all of the events and affairs of this world of ours. So it's the last day because that's when we will be in review. What does my progress report look like in my life? That's when I'll know. That's one wisdom. They also say that it's the last day because after the Day of Judgment, there's no significance to time whatsoever, right? What value is there in time in this life of mine? The value of time is because I am a subject of time. There was a beginning date and there's an expiration date, right? There's a day that I came into this existence, and that's my birth date. And there is a moment where my existence in this world will expire. That's why there's a significance to time. I'm going to live a certain number of years. And right before we started right now, one of the brothers was telling me about how his grandson passed away, 3 years old, passed away from cancer. May Allah Azza wa Jal give the family patience, and may Allah Azza wa Jal make this boy in the care of Prophet Ibrahim. But yeah, we all have expiration dates, right? Sometimes it might be as young as 3 years old, and for others it might be 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. But the point is, the value of time is because I only have a certain number of days. In the hereafter, or in the akhirah, it's endless. Either eternally in Jannah or eternally in hellfire. That's another reason why it's called the last day. Because after it, there's no significance to time, right? In the sense that there's an endless supply of it, right? So there's another term that we went over last time, which is al-a'raf. Al-a'raf refers to this staging area between Jannah and Nar, heaven and hell, where people who have equal amounts of good deeds and bad deeds will be stationed. Equal amount, how can you possibly get that? Well, it could happen. It could happen. Right, Sister Sada, if you could just close that door right there. Jazakallah khair, I appreciate it. It could happen, and we learn from this two things. One of the critical events of the Day of Judgment is my deeds will be weighed. Right? There's going to be this scale, right? The balance will be imposed. There's going to be a scale. And at that point, the only weight that will be significant will be the weight of deeds, right? In fact, there's there's prophetic traditions that state you will find a man who is massive in size, right? Very overweight, and he will not weigh by Allah Azza wa Jal the weight of the wing of a mosquito or a gnat. Weightless, right? Because what? The weight of the hereafter is only the weight of the deeds. In fact, there's this interesting prophetic tradition, another one, that teaches us the following. It says that there are 3 stations where no one will remember anyone. Everyone will be thinking about their own outcome. Where am I going to be? One of those is when the books are distributed. We believe that everything that we do in this life is being recorded, scrupulously recorded, by scribes, right? These angels are given instruction by God, by Allah, to write down everything that we do. And on the Day of Judgment, the books will be dispersed. Some people will get their book in their right hand, others will get it in their left hand, and others will get it from behind their back. Why? Because by us, the right is symbolic of paradise and Jannah. And the left, not because righty-lefty, has nothing to do with it. It's just been this idea and this notion that's been emphasized through the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to seek to do all that we can that is honorable with our right. Right? Some people are lefty by nature, right? There's no bearing on their status, and that's not what we're talking about at all. So the right and the left. Some people will get their book behind their backs. Why do you think they'll get it behind their backs? Yes. They'll try to hide their hand. They're trying to escape accountability. On that day, we're taught that there's no escaping accountability. So they'll try to hide their hand. The book will find its way to the left hand. In fact, on the Day of Judgment, other people try to escape accountability by denying that they did any wrongdoing. And on that day, we're told that the Quran tells us this, that the mouth will be sealed and the limbs will speak. It will say everything that the human being did. How will it speak? Well, I don't know. I need to be a little bit creative. Speaking is not only with a mouth and a tongue and teeth, right? That's how I imagine it in this life. But it will communicate, in other words, in a way that God's best aware, right? And it will speak of the things that were done with these limbs. What was done with my eyes, with my ears, with my hands, with my feet, and so on and so forth, right? They will witness against the human being. So the first station that no one will remember anyone is when the books are distributed. The second station that no one will remember anyone or think of anyone is when deeds are weighed. Everyone will be extremely nervous. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to me? And then the third station is when we're going to be crossing this bridge. You can actually see it in the terms over there. Yeah, these terms are very helpful, by the way. These terms, so we have the term sirat there. Sirat is a bridge. That's a bridge that's over hellfire, that every believer will pass over, right? As the Quran says, وَإِن مِّنكُمْ إِلَّا وَارِدُهَا كَانَ عَلَى رَبِّكَ حَتْمًا مَقْضِيًّا. Everyone will come to pass over it. This is a decree issued by Allah. Everyone will pass over this bridge. And this bridge is very narrow, and it has hooks on it. And some people will pass through this bridge like the speed of light. Some of them like a galloping horse. Some of them like someone who's running, someone like someone who's walking. And other people will set foot on the bridge and these hooks will come and snatch them and throw them into hellfire, right? So passing this bridge is not by any physical strength. It's not by physical strength. It is totally by the person's status through his deeds by Allah Azza wa Jal, or his acceptance or rejection by God. If a person's accepted, God will help him get through that bridge. If they're rejected, they will experience their accountability at that moment, right? So that's the third station where everyone will be focused on themselves. You know, there's other terms that are here. There's the term ba'th, resurrection. We believe that everyone will be cast forth from their graves on the Day of Judgment. We believe that, as the Quran says, the earth will become like it's a completely different body, right? It's like everything, the graves will be ejected from the earth, and it'll be utterly flat, no curvatures, no mountains, no valleys, nothing, everything flat. And the bodies will be ejected from the graves, and people will be resurrected, and they will be gathered. That's the next term, hashr. Hashr is they will be gathered to the land of reckoning. And we actually believe that the events of the Day of Judgment will occur in the sacred space of Jerusalem, right? Bayt al-Maqdis. It's Ardil Manshari wal Mahshar, as we refer to it. It's the land of resurrection. Hashr, Hisab, that's accounting. Mizan, scales. Sirat, I went over it with you. It's the bridge. The next term is Shafa'ah, intercession. And this refers to believers interceding on behalf of others to save them from the punishment of hellfire, or so that they can emerge from hellfire. And it also refers to the intercession of our beloved Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, so that the events of the Day of Judgment can commence. It's this detailed subject, but that's what shafa'ah is. There'll be this idea, we believe as Muslims that believers can enter hellfire. They won't eternally be in it, but they will be in it to the extent that they need to be held accountable for their decisions. In fact, the way we believe the process of cleansing happens is as follows. If the person has committed wrongdoing in their life, first off, if they did this wrongdoing before they were Muslim, and then they become Muslim, we believe that al-Islamu yajubbu ma qablah. Islam erases all that was before. Islam erases all that was before. And then they start with a clean slate, clean record. If they go on to fall into more wrongdoing after they become Muslim, we believe another cleansing factor is trials. We believe that every difficulty that the believer goes through in his or her life cleanses them from the effects of sins, to the extent that the person will walk upon this earth with no effect of sin on them whatsoever. That's the blessing of trials. And sometimes you might find this with someone, like in their last days, they might die from a terminal illness. And we believe that that's a form of martyrdom, shahada. Allah raises up. Allah is just, Allah is merciful. If someone dies from something as devastating as cancer, as painful as cancer, and has to be exposed to treatment, their death is not going to be, it's not going to go unrewarded. That patience in that difficult test is going to cleanse the effects of sins away from them completely, right? If that's not enough to clean their slate, then perhaps punishment in their grave will clean their slate. If that's not enough, then perhaps dealing with the calamities of the Day of Judgment. If that's not enough, then perhaps being exposed to the fire of hell for a period of time will cleanse them so that they emerge free of the effects of their sins. These are some of the terms that we went over last time. One of the other things that we went over last time is we introduced the signs of the hour. The signs of the hour, that you find that on page 83. Many of these have come true, have been fulfilled, right? Some of them, the larger signs, are the ones that we're still awaiting. You see them on the top of 83. The coming of the Mahdi, the awaited one. The return of Isa, Jesus. We believe that Jesus, Isa alayhi salam, will kill the Dajjal, who is referred to by other faith traditions as the Antichrist. Masih al-Dajjal. He's actually referred to in Islam as al-Masih al-Dajjal as well, the Messiah, the false Messiah. The false Messiah. That's how he's referred to in Islam. The hordes of Ya'juj and Ma'juj, rising of the sun from the west, the closing of the door of repentance, the coming of the talking beast, the removal of the Quran and knowledge from the pages, from the hearts, and the destruction of the Kaaba. All of these are major signs of the Day of Judgment. You know, I was supposed to recommend to you guys from last week a series that you guys could continue listening on these, because each one of these is discussed in detail. I'll try to remember to do that and send it in the group, inshallah. And of course, in part 2, you know, we have the book for that already. It's a part 2 to this. It's more detailed. Perhaps you'll find more details on this subject there as well. On 84, he mentions some verses from the Quran. The first verse he mentions, "And this worldly life is not but a diversion and amusement, and indeed the home of the hereafter, that is the eternal life, if they only knew." We see this life as a harvesting ground for the akhirah. And the pleasures of this life are temporary amusement, are diversions. Sometimes they're distractions. Sometimes the details of life distract from bigger picture. That often happens, actually, not sometimes. Right? So that's one way we characterize dunya. Dunya is the term to refer to this life. Dunya. D-U-N-Y-A. The bottom verse that he shares there is, every soul will taste death. Now, of course, you don't need to be a Muslim to realize that. Everyone knows that. It's a reality of life. But when the Quran says this, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, when the Quran says this, it's so that it can register that there is a meaning at this critical juncture. In fact, the most important point in my entire existence is at the moment of death. That's the most important point. Why is it the most important point? We have this concept in Islam that's referred to as husn al-khatima, a beautiful end. Husn al-khatima, a beautiful end. What does that mean? Meaning that the way I led my life is highlighted and emphasized by the way it ends, right? Islam teaches us to be a people who are very acutely mindful of how they conclude things. I need to finish this on the right foot, right? Right? إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالْخَوَاتِيمِ. Deeds are judged by how you end them, right? So that's why the most precious part of the day of Ramadan, for example, is in the end of Ramadan. That's when it's most precious, those last 10 nights of Ramadan. Same thing that I do with my prayers, right? What do I do as soon as I finish prayer in my salah? What do I do? Yeah, I do another form of prayer. So I don't allow myself to ever experience an end. In fact, when I finish fasting a full month of Ramadan, after I do Eid, what am I encouraged to do? Fast a little more with the 6 of Shawwal, right? There's always more. There's no such thing as a full, hard end to worship. That's something that I'm programmed to do as a believer. So, but this, every soul will taste death. What are we meant to understand from this? It's meant to register in my mind that there's this critical juncture. And why is it, again, I didn't answer that question. Why is it the most important point in my entire existence? The moment of death. Why? Why would you say? Because you're changing from one place to another? Well, that's true, you are changing from one, but why is it the most important point? It's the beginning. It's the beginning of what matters, which is the hereafter. Okay, you're pretty close. So this hereafter, where is my outcome decided? That's why it's the most important point in my existence. Why? Because, imagine it, this is like graduation day, right? For the believer, death, the day you die, is the day you graduate. You either graduate to Jannah or you plummet to hell. A'udhu billah. It's a graduation date. Why? That's the day that your report card's issued, right? Well, the day of judgment is the day you're actually going to enter Jannah, right? But when is it highlight? Okay, person X. How did this person live his life? Who was he in the unseen dimension? Who was he by Allah? Who was he? Who was she? That's going to be highlighted by the events that happen and transpire when the person's dying. If he was a believer, if he was a good person, the angels of mercy are going to be waiting right there. They're going to be embracing him. They're going to be giving him from the garments of Jannah. They're going to be giving him affirmations and assurances. And they're going to take his soul up, and the best of his attributes and accolades are going to be named as the soul is penetrating the heavens, right? So that's graduation day for the mu'min. When's your graduation day? If you wanna give someone a good laugh, and you're studying for something, and they ask you, when are you graduating? Tell them the day I die. I'm sure that'll give them a stir. But yeah, truly, that's the day we graduate as believers, right? And if it's the opposite, then we ask Allah to protect us. So every soul will taste death. This is so it could register in our minds, hey, you know what? That's a critical point in my existence. Let me prepare for it. All right. Now, if you turn to the next page, page 85, it tells us a little bit about the soul. So, all right. I'm made up of this physical body, and I'm made up of a soul, right? The soul is tethered to this body as long as I'm meant to live. Right? Last time we mentioned that there's a minor death and a major death. The minor death is, what's the minor death? Sleeping. The minor death is sleeping. The Quran says this, right? The soul leaves the body when you go to sleep, and it wanders. And sometimes you might even see a dream because the soul is wandering, right? And if you are meant to live and continue living, the soul is sent back to the body. If you're meant to die, then the soul will be withheld and you will never go back to that body again. That happens. A lot of people die in their sleep, right? So it's considered a minor death. It reminds us of the reality of death because you're utterly powerless when you're asleep. You can't do anything. What are you going to do? You have no control. You can't make any decisions while you're sleeping. You are utterly powerless, just like a dead person, right? So it's the minor death. And then the real death is when the soul is officially untethered from this body. Now, the soul has its own existence, right? It had an existence before this body came to be in the realm of the souls, alam al-arwah. And it will have this sense of existence in the barzakh, the life of the grave, right? It's not a physical reality, right? Now, on the Day of Judgment, the physical body will be, the soul will be linked back with a physical body, not this physical body that we're in right now, right? It'll be in a different different presentation. That's what we believe as Muslims, right? So, but beyond that, what do we know about the soul? Look at page 85, what he says here. They ask you, O Prophet, about the soul. Say, its nature is known only to my Lord, and you, O humanity, have been given but little knowledge. We don't know much about the soul. The soul is a unique being and a unique creation of Allah. It's something that we believe human beings will never be able to replicate, because it is by divine ordinance. The soul is by divine ordinance. قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي, as the Quran says. Now we know some things about the soul, that the soul, its presence is spread throughout the physical body. And that when the soul is leaving the body, it is snatched from the body, and it slowly leaves each of the limbs. In fact, the last presence for the soul is in the head, and that's why the eyes, you'll often find, are twisted for the person who passes away. The hadith tells us that sometimes you will find that the eyes follow the soul to the direction of it, where it's being extracted to. So the soul has its own being, but we don't know much more beyond that, and that's what the Quran says. Now the grave, look at what he says about the grave. After a person is buried, two angels, their names are Munkar and Nakir, come and awaken the dead person to ask him the questions of the grave. They're frightening and have voices like thunder. They ask three things. Who's your Lord? Who's your Prophet? What is your religion? These are easy questions to answer. But at that point, only someone who's blessed will be able to actually correctly answer these questions. Then he explains Barzakh. We already went over that, so we'll skip over it. He explains A'raf. We already went over that too, so we can skip over it. But the useful thing here is he mentions the verse about it for you there. And so that's why this is a really good book to have. It's a good book to reference these basic terms and study them. He explains Ba'ath, resurrection, on the next page, page 87. You see, the resurrection of all the souls occurs after the second blowing of the horn by Israfil. Who is Israfil? Israfil is the angel that's tasked with blowing in the horn when the last hour is meant to sound. The trumpet is blown by the angel Israfil, whose only duty is to blow the horn. With the first blowing of the trumpet, every living thing will die, and all things will be destroyed. Then after a period of time, all souls will return to their bodies. All animate life will be resurrected from their graves. Everyone, everything, humans, jinns, animals, insects, everything. And their bodies will come back to their original form along with their souls. Of course, but in different sizes, as I said. Hashr is the term for the gathering of all animate life. They will all be brought together on the plane of standing, on the day of standing, Yawm al-Qiyamah. Yawm al-Qiyamah means the day of standing. There are many frightening things that will occur after that day, after the accounting, hisab. Everything will be turned to dust except for human beings and jinn. Right? So why are animals resurrected for the day of judgment again? Why? Because it's a day of utter justice. And that's what's emphasized here. The Quran is described in the Quran, وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطَ لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ فَلَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. We will place the scales of justice for the day of judgment. No one will be oppressed a thing. The Prophet even tells us, a hornless sheep or a hornless goat will get its right from the horned goat that butt heads with it. Right? This hadith, what is it telling us? Why? Did this animal oppress that one? No. These are things that happen by instinct, right? So, but there's something emphasized here, meaning that every matter of justice will be presented. Nothing will escape accountability on that day. That's why animals are mentioned along with that. But after that, after the scenes of the Day of Judgment, animals who were in this life will cease to exist. Of course, there'll be creatures for Jannah that we learn about, but that's different, right? So that's what he says there. Then he says, on the next page, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had a practice of making certain supplications before sleeping and upon awaking. You know, this idea of resurrection, I'm reminded of it every time I wake up from sleep and every time I go to sleep. This is the dua we say in the morning when waking up. Alhamdulillah alladhi ahyana ba'dama amatana wa ilayhi nushur. What is it? He has it transliterated there for you so you could memorize it. What does it mean? All praises to Allah who gave us life after having taken it from us. And unto Him is resurrection. What do I say as a Muslim when I go to sleep? It says here, Bismika Rabbi wada'tu jambi. Right? In your name, my Lord, I lie down, and in your name I rise. So if you should take my soul, then have mercy upon it. And if you should return my soul, then protect it in the manner you do so with your righteous servants. Right? And then he teaches us another supplication after that. And then the following pages, I gave you guys a general explanation. Right? The following pages give you some evidences from the Quran about scenes from the Day of Judgment. For example, I'll mention something that he mentions on 90 that I didn't mention. He says about paradise, Jannah, it is a created place that is in existence now. It will remain forever as an everlasting reward for those who believed in Allah. It is the abode of reward. And that's what the Quran says. And those who were mindful of their Lord will be led to paradise in successive groups. وَسِيقَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا رَبَّهُمْ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ زُمَرًا. When they arrive at its already open gates, its keepers will say, peace be upon you. You've done well, so come in to stay forever. Now, hellfire, on the other hand, it is a created place that is in existence now. It will remain forever as an everlasting punishment for those who disbelieved in Allah. Allah knew before He created anything who would go into paradise and who would go into hell. We do not say that anyone is definitely going to Jannah or Jahannam unless there is an ayah or hadith. Right? This is an important part of Islamic belief. I can't speak of matters of the unseen. Do I know who's going to go to Jannah? I don't. I pray that I'm one of them, and I pray that I meet the criteria. Do I know for certain who's going to go to hellfire? I don't. I'm informed of the criteria. Among that is believing in Allah and believing in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But ultimately, how will people be judged and assessed by Allah? That's something that is strictly left to Allah. I would be transgressing if I say person X, Y, or Z is in the fire of hell, unless I have direction from the Quran otherwise. Like, so the Quran tells me, for example, about the uncle of the Prophet, Abu Lahab, someone who punished and tormented the Prophet. The Quran tells us that he will be in the fire of hell because of what he did. تَبَّتْ يَدَا أَبِي لَهَبٍ وَتَبٍّ. But can I say that person XYZ is in hell? I can't do that. That would be considered transgression against the rights of Allah if I was to do that. Now, other things that he mentions, if you turn to page 91, he tells us a few other things that I didn't mention as well. Only Allah knows the final state of people and whom He will forgive and whom He will not forgive. Allah even knows the sly glances of the eyes and whatever the hearts conceal. Some people who live their whole lives as Muslims and then leave Islam at the end of their lives. Some people will live their lives as non-believers and then accept Islam in their final moments. But we may not know that this has occurred. We should regularly ask Allah to give us the best ending, which is to die as a Muslim, right? But we do have a general criteria. Look at what the verse says. God does not forgive association with Him. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ. But He forgives anything less than that to whomever He wills, right? So that's about the states of the heart. The last thing that he mentions here for us, and this is a beautiful thing, one of the greatest gifts for the people of Jannah in Jannah is seeing Allah, seeing His divine essence. We don't have any depiction or any imagination. We're meant to actually pull that out of our mind. We don't imagine how God looks like, because if I can't comprehend His creation, how can I comprehend His essence? But we are told that one of the grand gifts for the people of Jannah in Jannah is that they will see Allah, right? وَجُوهٌ يَوْمَئِذٍ نَاظِرَةٌ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهَا نَاظِرَةٌ. The verse says, many faces that day will be glowing, looking towards their Lord. One of the best gifts for the people of Jannah and Jannah is seeing Allah, their Creator. So this is another thing that relates to the Day of Judgment and beyond. And that's pretty much what he addresses. Again, there's a whole lot more detail about this subject in later stages of study. But I think that this is enough to get a good idea about what the journey to the hereafter looks for us as Muslims, and some of the key features about death, about resurrection, about barzakh, the life of the grave, about the signs of the hour, and about the scenes from the Day of Judgment and the ultimate destinations between heaven and hell, Jannah and Nar. Now, that's pretty much that section. If you look at page 97, that's the beginning of the last chapter in this book, or I should say the last article of faith in this book, which is Divine Decree. It actually is not very detailed, and the last chapter, chapter 8, he actually gives you some other tenets of belief. You could read those all on your own. It speaks like belief in the night journey and the heavenly ascent, al-Isra wal-Mi'raj. It speaks about Sidratul Muntaha, the furthest lote tree. It also talks about other matters of character. It describes certain definition, the people of the Qibla, whoever faces the direction of Mecca. Qibla is the direction of Mecca. Jama'ah, congregation. It talks about a bunch of different concepts that are important for Muslims to know. It also speaks about repentance. The book speaks about repentance. It also tells us a little bit about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his main companions. There's this beautiful chart on 113. It tells us some of the companions, the Sahaba, who that we should know about, like Abu Hurairah, like Aisha, like Abu Bakr, like Anas ibn Malik, like Abdullah ibn Abbas. And it tells us the students of these and how knowledge was passed on to later generations. So this is a nice bit of detail that you could read about on your own. And of course, you could always reach out with questions if you have any. But inshallah, when we go over our next course, Faith Foundations, we'll go over a lot more details relating to the tenets of faith. But if you understood what was in this 6-part series, you will have a good idea of what you need to know in order to be a Muslim, in order to have clarity on what are the foundations of Islam, right? And that's really what was meant by this beginner course for people still considering Islam or people who are new to the religion. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept and continue to give us guidance and understanding. Now, I guess before we end, there's always the room for questions, comments. If you guys have, feel free to share. Anyone wants to ask anything? Anyone wants to ask anything? Hopefully relating to the subject first. If not, then we'll take anything. We have, go ahead.
I was reading my Quran, and it said that on the Day of Judgment it's going to be 3 groups, right? So it's going to be one group that's like, they're like super lavish, like everything is super nice for them. And then there's a second group where things are like just good enough. And then there's one group that's like going to be drinking like boiling water. Do you know like, I was trying to like distinguish, it was kind of hard for me to tell.
Which chapter was it?
Chapter like 55, I believe.
What was it called? What's the name of the surah? So you were trying to distinguish what?
The difference between someone that just gets like the regular good treatment and someone that gets the super good treatment.
Yeah, so Jazakallah khair, it's a great question.
56.
What's it named? Al-Waqi'ah. Okay, there you go. Yeah, Surah Al-Waqi'ah tells us about 3 groups, like you said. So there is a sabiqun, those who are foremost, right? So look at this. Pay attention. Jannah is levels, just like hellfire is levels. Not everyone will be the same. So for example, for Jannah, the highest station in Jannah, we call it Al-Firdaus. This is the most precious part of Jannah, where the Prophet ﷺ tells us that it is at the centermost point, at the highest most point, and from it the rivers or the waterfalls of Jannah or the rivers of Jannah gush forth, right? So this is al-firdaus. This is the highest level of Jannah for those who are at the greatest level of devotion in their worship to Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, there's this other thing that we believe as Muslims, is that there are 8 doors to Jannah. And like these doors are named. Some of them have names. Like for those who are foremost in fasting, they will have this special access. So like you can see, like there are certain areas that are restricted. Not everyone will get access to them in Jannah. But if you are someone who fasted, you'll be given this special access to Ar-Rayyan, right? This door of Ar-Rayyan. There's another door for those who are in jihad and struggling in the way of Allah. And there's other doors to Jannah. And in fact, one of the companions, Abu Bakr, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, will anyone enter all of these doors, have access to all 8? He says, yes, and you're one of them. He says about Abu Bakr, who was one of the greatest companion of our Prophet ﷺ. So there is levels of access in Jannah. Now, there's another hadith that tells us that the levels of Jannah, each level, between each level and the next, the people of the lower level see the ones in the higher level like we see the stars in the sky. Just like you see that, they're so high up like that, that's how the people of the lower levels will see those higher levels. In fact, there's this other beautiful hadith that tells us about the last person to emerge, the last believer to emerge from hellfire and enter Jannah. And, it's a long hadith, I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, but basically, after this experience of back and forth, this person, the lowest level in Jannah, will be given multifold what the most wealthiest person in this life ever had, right? So it's levels, right? That's why you have sabiqun, and then you have ashab al-yamin, the people of the right, and you have those foremost, so the surah, and then you have ashab al-shimali ma ashab al-shimal, as that surah al-Waqi'ah says, the people of the left. And again, it has nothing to do with the left hand or being lefty or anything like that. It's speaking about the people of misguidance, right? So hellfire is also levels. So for example, we learn from the hadith of the Prophet, he had an uncle who was very supportive of him. He championed the cause of the Prophet and he protected the Prophet, but he didn't believe. And his name was Abu Talib. The Prophet ﷺ was asked, did his support of the message help him in any way? And the Prophet responded, هو في ضحضاح من النار. He will be in this very shallow area in hellfire, and he will experience a lesser punishment. He'll still be punished because he didn't believe, but he'll experience a lesser punishment than what those who are of greater disbelief will experience. Right? Another verse in the Quran tells us that the hypocrites, munafiqeen, but we're talking about a special type of hypocrite. We're talking about the hypocrite who was a hypocrite in faith, right? Not a hypocrite in actions. What does a hypocrite in faith mean? That this was during the time of the Prophet. This was someone who was not Muslim, but said he was Muslim, right? He said he was Muslim, but he really wasn't. Why was he saying he was Muslim? To infiltrate the ranks of the believers, to cause strife, confusion, misdirection. So this is a deceitful person. The Quran says that this person will be in the lowest pits of hellfire, right? So there is this sense of lowest pits of hellfire as well. So it's levels. So that's why you see what you see. Hope that gives more sense. All right. Anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask? Yeah.
I'm still trying to wrap my mind around a little bit that I came from a Christian, right? But it says here as well, stated that God already knows who's going to make it in and who's not for show the praise, right? So if we're individual thinkers and we are individual actors,
Yeah.
while we're on earth, right? What is the purpose? If God already knows who's going to get in and not, then
Yeah.
He's going to be judging us by how? If He already knows
Yeah.
and we don't know, obviously, then He already has the end result.
Yeah.
So trying to find out the significance of it.
Yeah.
Already knows who's going to be in and not.
So just to restate the question for the live stream, if God already knows what we're going to do and choose, then what's the point of my existence? How is he going to hold me accountable? What's the point of being held accountable if he's judging me based on what? Like if he already knows, right? So it's a good question. This is something that we unpack, and that's why I told you the last article of faith, divine decree, is the most complex of them. This is something that we unpack there. But I'll give you a brief summary of our Islamic response to this question. So we as Muslims right now, there is this, we delineate between God's attributes and His supreme knowledge and awareness and our actions and choices. And of course, you can't compare anything to God, right? But we can try to give an example that'll help bridge the gap of our, limited minds. So right now, when we go over divine decree, there are two types of divine decree. There is that which is affirmed decree, meaning those are things that God has ordained will indeed occur. And there are other things that are conditional decree, meaning that there are a number of variables. God is aware of all of these variables, is aware of all of them. So when we state God's knowledge, this is what we say. God knows what happened, what is happening, what will happen, and He knows all that did not happen. Had it happened, how would it have happened, right? Now, of course, I hate to liken anything. Nothing can be likened to God. But now, when you're talking about a computer and computation, right? There's, said number of possibilities that could be computed with different results. The computer is aware of all of those outcomes, even if the equations to lead to those outcomes were not inputted. You follow me? Right? So this technology that human beings have come up with has this device that could account for all possible outcomes, had they possibly occurred. Now, of course, there's this definitely not what we're talking about when we're talking about with God. But it bridges this. So now we believe as Muslims, does your dua and your supplication make a difference? Yes, it does. Do your good deeds make a difference? Yes, it does. Do sins make a difference? Yes, it does. Our Prophet tells us in a hadith that an individual is denied part of his sustenance because of a sin that he commits, right? Meaning that there is, and that's all from the realm of conditional decree. Meaning that perhaps God had decreed that you would suffer from a major car accident, but because of this charitable donation that you made, God protects you from the outcomes of that. So there is this realm of choice that we have as human beings within the framework of God's divine decree, right? So now this is one part of the discussion. The other part of it, pragmatically, practically, because sometimes people, this is what happens when we think in the realm of theory, it takes us away from what we have directly in front of us. I had a conversation with someone who was considering Islam, and his biggest role, he was a very brilliant person. He is someone who studied, physics, and he's a very mathematical mind. He said, I want you to prove to me by 100% certainty that heaven exists. If you do that, I'll become a Muslim. That's what he said to me. And my response was, if you were looking for 100% certainties, like if you were looking for someone to give you what does 100% certainty mean even, right? So in his definition of it, he needs to see it to believe in it, right? It needs to be tangible, right? So there cannot be, but where do I allow myself to, I would not function in this world if I was looking for 100%, logically speaking, right? Everything. As I'm functioning in this world right now, can I guarantee with 100% certainty that after I just left my house right now, I'm going to return back in one piece? No, there's no way, right? When do I ever wait for 100% certainties to make a decision in life? That's what I'm trying to get to right here. When do I ever wait for 100% certainties? In other words, this logical fallacy that I have allowed to put me in this loop to stop me from making a decision is actually a straw man. It's not real. What am I really looking for? Do I just want to disbelieve just because? Or do I really have a legitimate argument against it? So anyway, let me get back to the main issue here. Pragmatically, practically, do I have knowledge of what God knows? So right now, you're sitting here. If you make a decision in this moment, you could just stand up and leave. Is anything going to stop you? No. You could make a decision to become Muslim right now. You could make a decision to leave Islam right now. I can make a decision that will cause me suffering and pain physically, right? Or I could do something else. As far as I'm concerned as a subject in Allah's kingdom, I am free to do. So you see, a large part of this discussion is in the realm of theory. Right? I will never know what God knows, right? I'll never know what God knows. So it's not going to affect my behaviors at all. So for all intended purposes, my actions do matter, right? If I get in the car and decide to go on the highway and floor it and go 150 miles per hour and hit into the median, is anyone going to say that's divine decree? So you know what Islam teaches us here? And you find this in the verses of the Quran. Allah teaches us to have this realization of personal responsibility. My actions do matter, because for all intended purposes, hey, when I do something, there's a causal relationship between cause and effect in this life, right? Turn on the fire, put my hand on top of it. And does Islam ever teach me, hey, put your hand in the fire and believe in the miracle of God, it won't burn you, just trust me, right? Does it ever teach us to do that? No, of course not. That would be silly, right? But is it possible by divine ordinance for fire not to burn? Yeah, we believe so, and it did that for Prophet Abraham, Prophet Ibrahim, right? But do I function based on that miracle? No, of course not. Of course not. I believe in the causal relationship between things. There's a cause and effect reality here, right? And really, the other part of it's all theoretical. Why do I need to worry about what's in God's knowledge, right? If let's just assume that this is a roadblock for me in the way of my faith, right? So why do we say that God knows all things? Because if He didn't, then His knowledge would be reactionary. And part of the reason why it's so difficult for me to digest this is because I can't imagine existence without time, right? Like, you were born, when were you born? You're going to tell me 1980. Someone else is going to tell me 1985, 1970, we're all subjects of time. We're within a timeline. So obviously, I fit somewhere in between. I wasn't on the first day, and I'm not going to, I'm somewhere in between, right? I'm a subject of, I can't imagine, but hey, if you think of it, this entire existence that we know, we believe is God's kingdom. God's beyond the confines and the rules of this kingdom. You know what? At a certain point, I will be beyond the rules of this kingdom too. And you know what? I get an eye into this, and I mentioned this, some of the other things, when I, at certain points in my existence, when I go to sleep, for example, do I feel time the way I feel it when I'm awake? No, I don't. No, I don't. So it seems like the rules could change, at least based on my perception. I could go to sleep and feel like I just slept for 10 minutes, and in fact, it was 10 hours that passed, right? So, are the rules of this universe the end-all, be-all? Well, I, as this ant in this ant farm, can't perceive with my eye and my mind anything else, because I've never been beyond the universe. So that's why it's hard for me to understand, right? But, because, look, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, hey, how does God know what's going to happen? And if He knows what's going to happen tomorrow, then what significance is there for tomorrow? and then I start thinking in this line. You see where I'm going with this? So there's a lot to say. It's a very philosophical discussion, and that's why I said it's very complex. But this is Islam's response. Islam's response is, hey, look, if it's a roadblock for you, don't worry about what God knows or God's attributes. What are you going to do? You don't know what's happening tomorrow, and we tell you, your actions definitely have their consequence. We don't believe that people are compelled to their ends, right? If that was, then there would be no significance to free will whatsoever. You know what's the significance to free will? Free will means people could choose to do what's right and to do what's wrong. And if I make the wrong choices and the evil choices, that'll be to my detriment. And if I make the right choice, that'll be to my betterment. That's what makes human beings unique and different than angels, right? My worship as a human being is so special and coveted because it comes by experience, submission, surrender, and choice, right? Wallahu alam, that's some thought. I hope that gives you some context for it. But again, at later stages of study, this discussion, again, like people have different like tastes and flavors. Some people like the high-level, complex, philosophical debates, and some people dread that thing. Just tell me what I need to do, man. I just want something spiritual. I want a spiritual dose. I want to get along in life, right? So some people, their brain starts hurting with that type of stuff. But anyway, I personally savor it. I think it's tasty. And if you like this and you want to read more about it, I could recommend books for you to continue your study in Islamic theology. Yeah, inshallah. Anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask?
And it's totally okay to book this if it's too much of a topic. But
Sure.
just because you slightly mentioned it, what is Islam's perspective or definition or meaning behind dreams? Like, is that like a thing in Islam?
So what is Islam? Yeah, go ahead, explain.
I was going to say, just because in other faiths, if you dream something, it has a certain significance, or it's like your unconscious speaking to you. And so I've heard and read about this, especially when sleep is equated to a minor death. But now that you mentioned it, it piqued my curiosity to
Yeah.
understand what is Islam's perspective.
So look, Jazakallah khair. What is Islam's perspective on dreams, and how are dreams is perceived, and interpreted in Islam? So this is what I would say to this. There are three possible sources to what I see in my sleep. There is divine messaging from Allah that may come to a person through dreams. We believe that one of the remnants of prophethood is the righteous dream that a believer sees, right? The second source is satanic in nature, influenced by the devil, right? And those are the disrupting nightmares that the individual may see in their sleep. Satanic influence. And the third source of influence is the nafs, is my subconscious, right? I watched the movie about killing, and then I see someone shooting at me while I'm sleeping, for example, right? It could be from the subconscious, right? These are three possible sources. Islam teaches me the following. Islam teaches me that dreams are not an exact science whatsoever. I cannot clearly affirm the contents of a dream. They're only a form of revelation to prophets. But for non-prophets, we have an example in Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Someone came to ask the Prophet ﷺ about a dream that he saw. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu asked the Prophet if he could interpret the dream. So he interpreted it in the presence of the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ then told him, you are correct in some regards and you are mistaken in other regards. أَصَبْتَ بَعْضًا وَأَخْطَأْتَ بَعْضًا. And by doing this, we learn, hey, look, if Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu could not know for certain the contents of a dream, that shows us that, hey, there's symbolism in dreams, but it will not be with 100% accuracy. Now, when will my understanding of a dream be more clear? It's said that the more pious a person is, the more true their dream will be. right? The more true their good dreams will be. We see the Prophet ﷺ tell us another thing. If you see something you like in your sleep, then see the goodness in it and tell those whom you love, for it is a mercy from Allah. And if you see something you dislike, don't tell anyone about it. Seek refuge in Allah from it. Blow to your side, the left side 3 times upon waking, and know that it will not harm you. It is from the effects of the shaitan. So, in effect, for a Muslim, you should be very careful. Symbolism in dreams, like, it's not an exact thing. But you could find certain connections in the Quran, or certain things that carry certain meanings. But can you say with certain that this is what's meant by this? No, you can't. It's very difficult to say that. So if you see something good, relish it, enjoy it, get excited by it. If you see something bad, seek refuge in Allah from it. That's all you need to do. And don't act upon it. You know, sometimes this happens that the shaitan comes to a person in their dream to disrupt them, to misguide them. Like he'll come to a person and he'll say something illicit to them. Sometimes it happens between husband and wife. Yes. So the shaitan comes to a husband, for example, and shows him in his dream that his wife is doing something behind his back. So he wakes up and he's disrupted by it, and it causes this conflict between husband and wife. This happens. It's by influence of the shaitan. Or the shaitan will come to you and show you someone in your life in a very bad image. Make you feel like this person's an evil person, or this person has bad intentions. And if you actually allow that to register and you act upon it, you would be very wrongful and sinful for doing that, right? So this is the guidance that we have on dreams. Now you will find, now let me just preface this, if you go Google Islamic dream interpretation, you will find all kinds of responses out there, you know. And to be honest with you, I would be very skeptical of the sources you find online for dream interpretation in Islam. Don't trust it. Don't Google dream interpretations. I saw a snake in my dream. What does that mean? All right, and then I'm going to start trying to find out who are the snakes, where they are. Are they, you know? May Allah Azza wa Jal give tawfiq. I hope you guys benefited, and I ask Allah Azza wa Jal to accept. We're going to stop with this course now, and inshallah in the fall we'll resume something else for our group of converts and reverts, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.